The last time anyone saw Ethan Thorne was on a September afternoon in 2001. The 6-year-old, from a small town in Compton, was known for his fearless riding and his bright red BMX. He was racing through the streets with his friends just as he always did, laughing, performing stunts, leading the pack. When night fell and Ethan didn't return home, it was assumed he had wandered off somewhere nearby, a belief that unsettled the entire community. When the search for him started and didn't yield result, the trail went cold almost immediately, leaving the Thorne family and the people of Compton with nothing but faded missing posters and 7 years of agonizing silence. Then in the summer of 2008, during the renovation of a foreclosed house, the scrape of a shovel against something metal beneath the soil would reopen the mystery, exposing a buried bicycle, a hidden crime, and a truth that had been weighing on one family since the day Ethan vanished. The day Ethan vanished, nobody expected it. I mean, that afternoon felt ordinary, just like every other afternoon. He had just finished his assignment at the kitchen table. When he asked his parents if he could go biking, it wasn't defiance. It was habit. His mom, Sarah, smiled without hesitation, and his dad, Dr. Alan Thorne, nodded in agreement. In this part of Compton, children rode freely. Ethan was the neighborhood's pride, charismatic without effort and naturally athletic. Biking was his joy. When Ethan rolled his bike out, other kids followed. Ethan always led, always laughing, always just out of reach. The Thornes had only moved to the neighborhood 2 years earlier, yet they were already woven into its fabric. Dr. Alan Thorne was the doctor everyone trusted. Sarah volunteered everywhere, knew everyone's name, and made people feel seen. Their son became a symbol of promise. Adults watched him ride past and said, "That boy's going far." Ethan had only one close friend, Liam Davies. Quiet, observant, the son of Jason Davies, a man known more for his drinking than his words. On this fateful day in September 2001, as Ethan pedaled down the sunlit street in Compton, no one watched for long. No one sensed danger. Why would they? This was home. This was a good neighborhood, and Ethan Thorne, the golden boy, was supposed to be safe. The afternoon drifted by in the familiar rhythm Ethan loved most. His bike rolled out first, and as always, the others followed. Doors opened. Voices called out. Within minutes, the street turned into a racetrack. They sped past driveways and mailboxes, laughter echoing between houses, the summer air thick with excitement. Ethan rode not to prove anything, but because riding felt natural, like breathing. He led the pack effortlessly, standing on the pedals, daring the corners, glancing back just long enough to grin. As the sun began to dip, parents' voices carried down the street, calling their children home. One by one, the bikes peeled away, and the race dissolved into goodbyes. By evening, the street was quiet again, the way it always became when playtime ended. Ethan wheeled his bike back home. When he got home, the house was unusually still. He padded through the living room and peeked into his parents' room. Both of them were asleep. For a moment, Ethan stood there, bike helmet still in his hands, listening to their soft breathing. The idea came without warning. One more ride. He knew the rules. He knew he should stay inside. But the street was quiet, the daylight not quite gone, and the pull of the open road felt stronger than caution. Moving carefully, Ethan eased the door open, stepping outside without a sound. He didn't plan where he was going. His feet simply pushed the pedals. Without thinking, after riding for some minutes, he turned toward Liam's house. He thought it could be the perfect chance to have some fun with his friend. When he arrived, Liam opened the gate. The yard was wide and inviting. Ethan circled the compound with Liam, riding slow now, tracing loose loops in the fading light. Then it happened. Ethan's chest tightened without warning. His hand slipped from the handlebars as his bike wobbled and crashed to the ground. He fell beside it, the breath knocked clean out of him. He tried to inhale, but air wouldn't come. He gasped, small sharp sounds tearing from his throat, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The bike lay still, the yard was silent. And Ethan Thorne, the boy who always outran everyone, could not ride any more. The scream shattered the quiet first. A tore through the Davies house. It was Liam's voice. It cracked as he yelled for help, stumbling backward from the yard with his body shaking and his breath uneven. He didn't know the words to use. He only knew something was terribly wrong. Liam's dad Jason burst through the front door barefoot, his wife closed behind him. Panic erased the haze of alcohol that usually clung to him. They ran toward the sound, toward the open compound, toward the small body lying unnaturally still beside a fallen bike. Jason reached Ethan first. One look was enough. The boy's eyes were half open, unfocused. Jason dropped to his knees, pressing his fingers to Ethan's neck and then to his wrist, again and again to see if he can feel a pulse, as if trying harder might change reality. But nothing. No pulse. No breath. He tried to press on his chest, maybe cardiopulmonary resuscitation could help, but sadly it didn't. "He's not breathing," Jason whispered, more to himself than anyone else. His wife froze, hand over her mouth, trying to control herself not to scream. Jason pulled back slowly, the truth settling in with crushing weight. The child was gone. The golden boy of the neighborhood lay lifeless in his yard. Jason turned sharply to Liam. "Liam," he screamed mid-voice, "tell me what happened." His voice wasn't angry, it was terrified. Liam's words tumbled out in pieces. "Dad, Ethan just came over on his bike and we were riding. We were just riding around. Then all of a sudden Ethan fell. He started gasping." Liam cried as he spoke, repeating the same sentence over and over. "He just fell, Dad. I swear he just fell." Jason listened, but his mind raced ahead of the moment. He knew this neighborhood. He knew its whispers, its judgments, its neat lines between good families and bad ones. He knew who he was to them. A man with a drinking problem and a past that never stayed buried. A dead child in his yard. Jason looked at Ethan's dead body again, then at his shaking son. No one would believe this was just an accident. Not from him, not from Liam. Behind the closed doors of the Davies house, panic didn't just live, it multiplied. Jason's wife grabbed Liam by the shoulders before the boy could say another word. Her hands were trembling as she pulled him toward the house, whispering urgently for him to go inside, to sit down, to say nothing. Liam resisted at first, eyes locked on Ethan's still body, guilt and fear tangling in his chest. But when his father finally snapped, "Go, now," Liam obeyed. The door shut behind them, sealing the screams inside. Jason was alone in the yard with Ethan's dead body. The truth stood right in front of him, plain and unbearable. A child had died in his compound. An accident, yes, but accidents didn't matter once stories began to grow. He imagined what would happen if he said the truth. The whispers, Jason Davies, the drunk, his son. Police lights washing over his house, neighbors watching from behind curtains. He knelt beside Ethan again, his mind tearing itself apart. He thought in his mind, should I call for help and lose everything, or act now and protect my son from a story that would never let go? Fear won in his mind. And as night fell, Jason made the decision that would haunt every breath he took afterward. He moved fast, not thinking too deeply, because thinking would stop him. By midnight, when the yard looked quiet again, too quiet, he drove to the lake under cover of darkness. The water waited, black and still, swallowing reflections. Jason stood there for a long moment, staring, his chest burning with the weight of what he was about to do. Then he finally did it. He threw Ethan's dead body in the lake, got back into his car, and sped off with fear. When he returned home, he thought of what he could do to Ethan's bicycle. Then the idea came. He dug a pit in his backyard and buried it beneath the ground with shaking hands. Inside, his wife sat silently, Liam sitting terrified beside her. No one spoke. Words had lost their meaning. Jason had chosen fear over truth. And in doing so, he had crossed a line there would be no coming back from. Back in the Thorns' house. When Sarah Thorne woke up, it was 10:05 p.m. She noticed the silence before she noticed anything else, the kind that felt wrong. She went to Ethan's room and opened the door. Ethan wasn't inside. Then she went to the compound calling his name, but she didn't get no response. That was when she noticed Ethan's bike wasn't even parked where Ethan always packed it. That was when fear set in. She went back in and woke her husband up in a terrified manner. "Sweetheart," she screamed, "our son, I can't find him. This is 10:05, where is Ethan?" Alan's eyes opened widely after hearing what Sarah just said. He went out yelling his name, but there was no answer. When they both stepped out of their compound shouting their son's name, the neighborhood was awake. Flashlights sliced through hedges and alleyways as neighbors spilled into the streets, calling out for a boy everyone believed would answer back. Ethan's name echoed from yard to yard, growing more desperate with each hour. Dr. Alan Thorne searched with frantic precision, checking places a doctor's mind goes first, places where small bodies might fall or hide. Sarah followed behind him, her voice breaking with every call. The night gave them nothing. Morning panic set in fast. Police cars arrived and the search for Ethan started officially. Officers walked the routes Ethan usually rode, but no signs of Ethan was found. No signs, no leads, just a missing child and a bike that had vanished with him. Posters went up before noon. Ethan's face stared out from telephone poles, shop windows, church boards. "Have you seen this child?" The town plastered his smile everywhere, as if refusing to let it disappear. Parents held their kids closer. The belief that nothing bad ever happens in this neighborhood quietly died. Days passed, then weeks. The investigation slowed, not from lack of care but lack of answers. No evidence, no direction, just theories that went nowhere that made the town grew restless. Dr. Alan Thorne became two men. By day, he treated patients with steady hands and tired eyes, stitching wounds, offering reassurances he no longer believed himself. By night, he walked the streets, revisiting paths Ethan loved, searching shadows for something, anything, he might have missed. The town waited, and the silence grew heavier than grief. Guilt does not wait for time to pass. It moves in fast, cruel years. As for Jason Davies, who dumped Ethan's dead body in the lake, he began to fall apart. Sleep abandoned him first. Then appetite. Every quiet moment became an interrogation he could not escape. The image of Ethan in the yard, the sound of Liam's scream, the weight of the decision he had made when fear took the wheel. Alcohol became his escape from this depression he was falling into. Morning drinks and bottles multiplied in corners. People noticed. They always do. Jason grew jumpy, distant, volatile. He avoided eye contact and flinched at sight of police vans. And inside the house, the damage spread quietly. His son Liam stopped talking about bikes. He stopped talking at all. The boy woke up crying some nights, breathless, clutching at his chest as if the air might disappear again. Other nights he stared at the ceiling until morning, eyes too old for his face. Jason and his wife made the decision for the sake of their son's sanity. They told Liam it was for his own good, a change of environment, fresh air, a chance to clear his mind. He was sent to the neighboring city to stay with his grandmother, a woman gentle enough to ask no questions and firm enough to keep secrets. Liam packed his things without protest, and his parents drove him to Grandma's place for a fresh start. The house felt emptier after he left. Jason drank more. The truth lived with him now, aging him faster than the years ever could. While the town searched for answers, Jason carried them alone, rotting inside him, heavy and unspoken. And guilt, unlike people, never forgets where it belongs. In 2008, the paperwork made it official. Ethan Thorne was no longer missing. He was presumed dead, a legal sentence that felt colder than any grave. For Alan and Sarah, the words changed nothing and everything at once. There was no body to bury, no final moment to hold onto, just a signature on a page that told them to accept what their hearts had already been living with. They learned how to function without healing. Sarah, sometimes she sat on the floor and folded Ethan's old clothes again, as if repetition might soften the ache. Alan returned to work fully, throwing himself into medicine with relentless focus. He became known as a doctor who never gave up, who chased answers long after others stopped looking. At night, though, the searching continued, not through streets anymore, but through memory. Across town, silence rotted into consequence. As for Jason Davies, luck ran out the way it always does, slowly, then all at once. He hadn't been regular at work, and after series of queries and warnings, he lost his job without ceremony. At home, reality pressed harder. His wife was pregnant again. The news should have brought hope. Instead, it brought panic. Bills stacked. Prospects disappeared. Jason stared at the future and saw only walls closing in. A new child on the way and a secret that grew heavier with every passing year. He drank to forget. He drank to remember. He drank because stopping meant hearing Ethan's name in his own head. 7 years of silence had not buried the truth. It had only taught it how to wait. With a child on the way and no steady income, Jason Davies clung to the one thing he hadn't tried yet, starting over. He convinced himself that if he could just build something, anything, the past might finally loosen its grip. The bank approved the loan with careful smiles and strict terms. Jason signed where they told him to sign, using the house as collateral, the same house that held 7 years of silence, the same walls that had heard a child scream and never spoken of it again. For a brief moment, hope returned. Jason threw himself into the business with a frantic energy that looked almost like redemption. He woke early, talked about the future with a spark his wife hadn't seen in years. The business was going well at first, then some kind of backwardness and struggle creeped in. Costs rose, clients vanished, payment promises compromised. The stress of how to cope with repaying the loan reopened old habits. One missed payment turned into two, then three. The calls began polite at first, then cold. When the business collapsed, it didn't explode. It sagged quietly and hopelessly. Jason watched everything unravel with the same numbness he had felt the night Ethan died. He stopped answering the phone, stopped opening letters. When the notice came, it felt inevitable. The loan was in default. The house was being seized. He stood in the living room as strangers walked through, measuring walls, noting defects, speaking as if he wasn't there. His wife cried in the kitchen, pregnant and exhausted, holding on to a future that no longer had a place to live. The house was taken, and ownership changed quietly. The new owner saw potential where others saw just a building, a fresh start. The plan was ambitious: renovate the property, expand the land, convert it into a small private school, a place for children, a future built over a past no one asked about. Work began early and quietly in that summer of 2008. Hammers rang, shovels bit into soil that had not been disturbed in years. Then one afternoon a worker froze mid-swing. His shovel had struck something solid, not rock, not pipe, metal. They dug slower after that. The sound changed, hollow, scraping, wrong. Dirt was brushed aside by hand until a curved handle emerged, then a wheel rim eaten away by time. Rust flaked off in red streaks as the object was pulled free. A child's bicycle lay beneath the earth, bent and lifeless, as if it had been waiting. The site went silent. The workers knew immediately this was no ordinary find. No one joked. No one touched it again. The foreman called the property owner straight away, and within minutes, plans were abandoned. The owner made one call, and the police answered. Police arrived, tape went up, cameras followed. By evening, the story had escaped the property and spread through the town like wildfire. Photos circulated, details resurfaced. The rusted bicycle was identified by some members of the neighborhood that came around the building after hearing the news. It belonged to Ethan Thorne. 7 years after he vanished, the town finally had something tangible to hold on to. Not a body, not answers, but proof that the past had been buried, literally, beneath their feet. Dr. Alan Thorne stood at the edge of the taped-off yard, staring at what remained of his son's joy. Sarah couldn't bring herself to look. Around them, the town whispered again, but this time the silence had cracked. The earth had given something back. And it was only the beginning. But Jason and his wife no longer lived in that neighborhood. He already rented a small apartment at the outskirts of Compton for he and his pregnant wife to keep their heads. Jason's arrest came swiftly, almost brutally. The moment the officers arrived, he didn't resist. No shouting, no pleading, just a quiet surrender as they led him away. His wife watched from the doorway, her face pale and unreadable. In the sterile silence of the interrogation room, Jason sat motionless. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glow on the metal table between him and the detectives. They asked questions, but Jason didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He could have told them everything. He could have described how the boy had been playing with his son in the backyard, laughing and chasing each other through the dust. How, in a sudden moment, the boy had collapsed, gasping, clutching his chest. How he had rushed to help, had tried everything he could. But Jason said none of this. He simply admitted that the boy had died in his house. That was all. No context, no defense. He bore the weight of the truth alone, shielding his family from the storm that would follow. He knew the media would twist the story, that the community would judge, that the law might not understand the nuance of a tragedy born from innocence. Questions would follow. Blame would spread outward, inevitably landing where he could not allow it to land, on his son, on his family, on a moment that was already unbearable. In that moment, Jason chose silence, not out of guilt, but out of love. He protected his son from the trauma of reliving that day, his wife from the scrutiny of public shame. He let the world believe what it would because some truths, he knew, were too fragile to survive the harsh light of interrogation. Jason was charged to court, and when the big day came, the courtroom filled slowly, as if even the air was reluctant to witness what was about to be decided. Jason sat between his lawyer and a uniformed officer, hands folded, eyes forward. He did not look toward the gallery when Ethan's parents were led in. Their grief was audible before a word was spoken, an ache that seemed to press against every wall. When they testified, their voices trembled but did not break. They spoke of Ethan's childhood, of inhalers kept in backpacks and bedside drawers, of late-night hospital visits that had taught them how fragile breath could be. Yes, Ethan had asthma, severe at times, unpredictable. They confirmed it plainly, clinically, as if facts alone might somehow ease the loss. Jason's lawyer rose slowly, careful with every word. He did not argue that a crime had not occurred. Instead, he reframed the question the court had been circling without nodding, not what happened to Ethan, but what happened to Jason afterward. He spoke of panic, of shock, of a man trapped between truth and terror. He asked the jury to consider fear, not as an excuse but as a force. When Jason was called to speak, his voice was low, almost brittle. He did not deny his actions. He explained the boy had fell under a kind of attack while biking in his compound. He spoke of disbelief, not of the court, but of the world. Of how a dead child in one's home rewrites every assumption. Of how he feared no one would believe it was sudden, accidental, uncontrollable. "I was afraid," he said simply, "afraid of losing my family too." The courtroom divided itself not by sides, but by conscience. When the charges were read, they landed with quiet finality: abuse of a corpse and obstruction of justice. Not intended murder, but it's a wrongdoing at the same time. Jason closed his eyes as the words echoed. The court had spoken, not to his heart but to his actions. And in that moment he understood that fear, once unleashed, does not vanish when the truth finally arrives. The judge's voice carried no anger, only restraint. 3 years imprisonment. Jason nodded once, not in agreement but in acceptance. The sentence was not cruel. It was precise. Jason's wife did not cry as deputies led Jason away. She had already spent her tears in the months before, packing them into the nights when sleep refused to come. That same week, she left the apartment they had just rented and traveled to the neighboring city where Liam and his grandma were staying. Liam asked about his father in fragments, questions without edges, answers without clarity. Time moved differently for Jason behind bars, measured in routines and echoes. Outside, it moved forward without permission. Seasons passed. Liam grew taller, quieter. Before Jason's release, a letter arrived that changed the weight of his days. His wife had given birth to a baby girl. He read the line again and again, letting the joy ache inside him. A life had begun while his stood still. He imagined her face, her breath, the sound of her cry, proof that the world continued, even after everything. For Ethan's parents, the sentence offered partial closure. They found just enough ground to start afresh again. After 3 years, Jason stepped out of prison with a small box of belongings under his arm. 3 years had passed, yet the air felt unfamiliar, as though freedom required practice. His wife stood a few steps away waiting for him, steady, older in ways time alone could not explain. Liam hovered beside her, no longer the boy Jason had left behind. Liam had grew up with the quiet burden of knowing something terrible had happened, even if the details remained blurred. It shaped him, not with anger but with caution, an awareness that moments could fracture without warning. Their embrace was quiet, careful, as if they were afraid sudden movement might undo the moment. Words felt unnecessary. Survival had already said enough. Then she was placed in his arms. His daughter was lighter than he expected, warm and real, her fingers curling around his without knowing who he was. Jason held his breath, overcome by the fragile weight of a life that had begun without him. He searched her face for recognition and found none, only innocence. Instead of pain, it brought resolve. He would earn his place in her world, one day at a time. Home did not feel like return. It felt like arrival somewhere new. Freedom, he discovered, was not the absence of walls but the presence of responsibility. The memory of Ethan never left him. It lived in pauses, in caution, in the way he watched his children breathe while they slept. Jason had walked out of prison, but he was not free, not from memory, not from consequence. Yet within that weight he found purpose. He was a changed man, not redeemed, not absolved, but awake, determined to live carefully, honestly, and fully for those who had waited for him on the other side of the gate. If you really enjoyed this video, like and comment your opinion below in the comment section, and also subscribe to this channel to enjoy more crime-related contents every day.